Hi, I'm Sarah,
And I'm Lisa.
and we are the co-creators of SLP Toolkit. And what do you want to talk about today, Lisa?
I think it's really important to talk about selecting appropriate treatment goals and developing an IEP for a student.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to talk about. I know that's something that I could always use help with.
So, what is your current method?
I make really smart guesses.
What, what does that mean?
I throw darts to a dartboard.
Awesome. I like it.
Yeah, I pick synonyms in describing.
Oh no, every student has a goal for using vocabulary.
It's important, so I just like to target it.
Well, they do need to learn stuff.
Okay.
And we often get asked about the present level assessments and exactly what you can use those for. And we designed those specifically for you to be able to design an effective and comprehensive treatment plan for your students. And oftentimes in some of the message boards and even questions I get asked working as the lead in my district is, how do we design an IEP? Do we have to do an assessment in order to do that? And really, the idea of a full evaluation and assessment when you put a student in the evaluation process is just to determine eligibility. So those tests like the SELF or the CASEL are great for comparing a student against other students of the same age and to determine if a language disorder is present. But that's not how you should design your treatment plan then for the students. You don't pull from those subtests and write goals like student will, I'm trying to think of some of the things I see sometimes.
I know one that I think of is that sentence comprehension test, which I love because it's great for looking to see if a student understands all of those parts of speech. But it's not something I would write a goal for. I'm never going to have a child select between pictures the correct response when I give a sentence.
It just gives you an idea of exactly when you're going in to analyze where are their breakdowns, and then you would compare that information to your descriptive data and how they're doing in class to then select appropriate targets to work on.
Yeah. The other one is that formulated sentences. It's a great test for looking to see what syntax and grammar errors they may have difficulty with, but you're never going to want to base a decision on whether or not a child needs to work on something like plurals, for example, because of their performance on that subtest. There's only like 2 or 3 opportunities for that child to show you if they can do plurals or not. And so it's just not a good indicator. There weren't enough opportunities of use to decide whether or not that's a target for therapy.
And sometimes they don't understand the instructions. When it's in that kind of artificial sort of format, they just don't really understand always what you're asking of them. So you want to use that information. It's really excellent information for eligibility, but then you also do your language sample and you can do some informal tests like criterion reference tests and maybe have them do something like do a narrative, describe what they see in a picture scene, and that will really give you some more authentic information to compare with that standardized information to then design a treatment plan for them.
Yeah. And I know I always had a problem, and I shouldn't say had, I still did up until getting access to these present level assessments of sometimes I just didn't know which direction to go. Even if I had worked with a student for a long time, I wasn't maybe quite sure of what should he be doing or what are his needs. I've been so hyper focused on treating his goals that were on his current IEP that maybe I didn't look at the whole picture. And so I never really knew what was the best way for me to be able to get that profile of his strengths and needs, and where should I be taking him next.
And to look at more than just the skills. That's why I love our present level assessments, that it's not just those isolated language tasks like synonyms or definitions or things like that, but really bringing in some of those more authentic measures, like how do they do on a narrative retell? How do they describe that picture scene? How do they do with informational text? We have opportunities for you to quickly be able to get some of that information at the point, not just of assessment and evaluation, but also for your annual IEP.
Yeah. So whether or not you use the present level assessments we have an SLP toolkit, or you're trying to find a way to create your own, I definitely think we can never skip that descriptive piece. So you need to have some kind of a language sample. And I am not telling you in the real world that you are ever going to use SALT to transcribe a language sample, but you need to find a way to be able to analyze or not analyze, but maybe some guiding questions of things that you should be listening for. Narrative retells are
Mhm.
amazing. I think that is such a important task that we don't maybe always use, but they tell us a lot about children's language abilities and directly relate to curriculum. That's a skill that those children need to be able to have. And so you do need to do some kind of a narrative retell.
And depending on the age of the student, so for our younger students, narrative retell is
Mhm.
great, getting some conversation. But then also for our older students, you might want to switch over to an expository task. So, how do they break down telling you how to do something, and also some conversation? And then, if you have the opportunity to see that student in different contexts, do they speak differently with their peers on the playground, or if you're working with older students, with their peers in the lunchroom or in the hallway? Things like that. If you can see them using language in different ways, the more information you can gather, the better.
Yeah.
IEPs are meant to be meaningful, and I think sometimes we look at them as just a hoop to get through, but really the whole purpose of these documents are access for our students. So when you're selecting targets, they really should match to what your present levels say. What are the strengths and needs of the student? What are the difficulties the student is having in the classroom? Connect all of those pieces of the puzzle to drive your treatment time, your treatment goals, and
Mhm.
really make an individualized plan for that student.
Yeah. And then on our present levels, we do include specific skills that we would expect children at that age level to be able to do. And that is something that's nice. If you can come up with some questions and things to target those specific skills, you'll be able to help yourself a little bit too with selecting targets. And so how do you go about doing that? We use developmental milestones as far as those would take us. And then we did use the Common Core standards to help guide us. We've talked a lot about Common Core standards and how they relate. They are great. We love the listening and speaking standards. They did a great job of being able to define some of those language underpinnings that are required to access curriculum. And so use those. They have task analyzed a lot of skills for you. Now, would you want to target a grade level standard as a goal? No. And can you tell us a little bit about why that's not an effective way to do it either?
Well, the Common Core standards, if you think about it, they're written as an academic standard that a student is supposed to achieve by the end of the school year. So if you are selecting a grade level standard of, say, a fourth grade listening and speaking standard for a student that is in fourth grade as your IEP goal, that's a skill they're not even supposed to master until the end of the school year. That's something that the teacher is working on. So it wouldn't be an appropriate target for an IEP goal. But what you would want to do is talk to that teacher, whether you're using Common Core standards or any academic standards. You want to look at what standards is the student doing well on, what standards is the student struggling on, and have that dialogue to find out where does the language deficit connect with the academic standards.
Mhm.
Use a lot of different resources, but always go back to your professional judgment as well, as far as what your students' needs are, what the expectations are in their classroom, and go from there.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that about clinical judgment is we did create these present level assessments to do all of the things that we just told you are a good idea for collecting information. And so to save yourself the headache, we hope you use them and that they do help you, but we don't analyze them for you, because that is where your clinical judgment comes in. You can take the information and do with it what you need to do. So will it give you a summary of strengths and needs? Yes, but it's still your decision on what areas that you feel will be most beneficial, what will give you your most bang for your buck, and what's going to help that student progress in the curriculum. And so definitely never forget that that's what you went to school for, and trust that judgment. But I do think the present level assessments give you a really great comprehensive profile, and the information you need to make an informed decision.
In closing, remember that you do important work, and hopefully this will help you to be your best. Check out our other videos on our YouTube channel.